The council chamber trembled as General Crowell's voice echoed through the marble halls. His scaled hands tightened on the edge of the tribunal podium. War scars etched his armor, and the faint hum of his artificial lungs accompanied every breath. He'd stood before the Imperial High Command a dozen times in his career, but this was the first time they laughed in his face. "I watched them carve through us," he began, his voice gravel-thick and hollow. "Not with numbers. Not with ships. With minds sharp as blades and instincts older than our oldest war hymns." The High Lord scoffed, leaning back in his gilded chair, robes flowing like oil over steel. "We are the Galactic Empire, General. You imply that primitives from an isolated system, on the fringe of map space, pose a threat?" Crowell's jaw flexed. "I'm telling you, they are different. They don't break ranks. They don't retreat when outnumbered. They don't fight by the rules we understand. And they adapt mid-battle." A junior tactician muttered. "A small reconnaissance failure, exaggerated by trauma." Crowell's glare silenced him. "I lost half my fleet on Dega 5 before I saw the face of a single human. By then, their traps had dismembered our landing units, our communications were compromised, and our command officers eliminated in sequence. They observed, they mapped us, and when they struck, they knew exactly where to bleed us." A murmur rippled through the room. The Emperor's advisor, a shriveled Lahari with data glyphs implanted in his skull, scrolled through casualty reports. "We noted the anomaly, but the system isn't strategically significant. One setback doesn't define a species." Crowell lifted his arm and tossed a small holodisk onto the table. It activated, revealing the aftermath of the Dega ambush. Blackened ships twisted in orbit. Burned wreckage of advanced walkers. A downed Imperial cruiser with its engines hollowed and its bridge surgically dismantled. The worst image, a squad of human soldiers moving silently through the chaos, calm, precise, eyes forward, not a word spoken. "They don't worship battle," Crowell said. "They don't romanticize war. They endure it. They survive. And when pushed, when cornered, they make sure you regret it." High Lord Vernax tapped his fingers. "Then let us test them properly. If they fight with such fury and desperation, we'll press with full force. Burn 3 colonies. See if they still stand tall. You will provoke a hive you don't understand," Crowell warned. "Your war manuals won't help. Your fleet formations, your honor duels, your chain of command, they will chew through them." Another general laughed. "Then let them try. What can Earth offer that we haven't crushed before?" Crowell's tone dropped to a low growl. "They offer nothing. That's what terrifies me. They don't invade. They don't posture. They vanish after the fight, dragging their wounded, leaving their dead buried in silence. No flags. No monuments. Only a trail of broken steel and silence." A moment of unease settled. Then, the Empire's grand strategist stood. A tall, sleek Osari with eyes like molten silver. "General Crowell, we thank you for your concerns. The High Command will assess the validity of your reports and respond accordingly. You are dismissed." Crowell stared at him, realizing that none of them heard him. Not truly. They saw a defeated old soldier preaching fear from one lost battle. They saw a warrior shaken, not a survivor who understood the predator's growl before it lunged. He turned to leave but paused. "You mistake humanity's silence for weakness. That silence isn't peace. It's the sound before the strike." The doors closed behind him. Inside, laughter resumed. Jokes about Terrans and their fragile bones. Someone suggested bottling Earth's oceans after conquest. Someone else wondered if humans even had cities or still lived in caves. As Crowell walked the cold corridors alone, his hand brushed the faded sigil on his breastplate, scratched in haste during his retreat from Dega. It was a crude symbol, copied from the wreckage of a human unit he barely escaped. A skull with a knife driven through it, crowned by fire. No words. Just that image. He'd watched a Terran officer impale his own leg to stay silent during interrogation. He'd watched wounded soldiers carry the dead with reverence and zero complaint, as if pain was a given, not a burden. And he'd listened, shaking in his exosuit, as a human sniper whispered coordinates to her team moments before vaporizing 2 dropships from a ruined tower with scavenged artillery. Crowell entered his transport, lights flickering, crews silent. As the ship lifted off, he gazed into the stars and whispered, "You'll hear them soon. You won't see them coming, but you'll hear them. And by then, it'll be too late." The Imperial fleet entered Earth's sector with the force of a storm. 72 warships, 4 supercarriers, and over 200,000 troops stood ready. Admiral Tovin, young and hungry for glory, led the assault with absolute confidence. Earth's colonies were scattered and poorly defended. Victory seemed certain. The operation began with an invasion of New Santiago, a human settlement barely 2 decades old. Scans revealed no planetary defense grid, no orbital deterrence, not even a unified military presence. Tovin ordered a full descent without resistance. Transports touched ground. Troops fanned out. Still, no engagement. No formal surrender. No defenders. Imperial forces established a perimeter. Within hours, the mood shifted. Communications dropped without warning. Drones failed to respond. Patrols vanished one by one. The air grew heavy with static, and even the advanced mapping systems began registering ghost signatures and false readings. Tovin's second-in-command reported entire squads missing. Their last recorded audio was a burst of clicking, then silence. Surveillance footage recovered from a crashed scout showed 3 shadows moving silently through fog, then a blinding flash. The scout's headgear recorded 1 frame, humans in dark, adaptive armor with visors glowing faintly red. No insignia. No banners. Just motion like hunting cats. Panicked, Tovin doubled patrols. Within 6 hours he had lost 1,300 men. Explosions tore through supply routes. Barracks combusted in synchronized blasts. Ammunition depots disappeared in fireballs. Troopers found their commanders' bunkers rigged with motion-sensitive mines. Every attempt to regroup resulted in flanking attacks. Even the Empire's elite shock units were picked off by unseen snipers, their vitals cut through armor with surgical precision. Tovin demanded reinforcements from orbit. Shuttles never arrived. Human interference had severed their uplink without brute force. It was a quiet shutdown, code injection, network bleed, signal rerouting. His entire fleet, disconnected from the surface, drifted blind in orbit, unable to contact ground teams. A captured human operative, injured and restrained, was brought to Tovin's temporary command tent. She was young, barely adult by Imperial standards, eyes like steel. When questioned, she said nothing. Tovin threatened execution. Her only reply: "You'll run out of men before we run out of resolve." She bit down on something in her jaw and died before medical drones could intervene. Tovin reviewed recovered battlefield data. The enemy didn't rely on numbers. Small strike teams deployed surgical strikes. They moved through narrow canyons and industrial ruins, turning terrain into death traps. They used improvised explosives, repurposed Imperial gear, even hacked enemy drones and redirected them against their owners. Every encounter felt like a lesson learned by the humans. His field commanders began reporting extreme morale decay. Troopers refused night patrols. Sleep deprivation set in. Combat stimulants ran low. Some officers executed their own men for desertion. Still, the hemorrhaging continued. Messages sent to command relays went unanswered. Reinforcements were delayed without explanation. Tovin ordered a fallback to the landing site. The retreat turned into a massacre. Charges detonated along the retreat path. Terrain that had been clear hours before was now riddled with concealed spikes, buried mines, and pitfalls. What survivors remained were funneled toward a broken aqueduct where human marksmen awaited with scavenged energy rifles, firing with calculated precision. His adjutant, covered in ash and blood, collapsed at his feet with eyes wide and mouth trembling. "They're not fighting. They're culling us." No one disagreed. Tovin tried to signal orbital command. No response. He boarded an evac pod and ascended into the black, only to see his flagship, a 3-kilometer dreadnought, listing its hull breached from within. Internal security footage showed human saboteurs in pressurized suits, cutting through walls like insects in a hive. They bypassed airlocks, slipped through maintenance shafts, and uploaded a virus that erased the ship's AI core in under 5 minutes. Tovin's voice cracked as he recorded a report. These aren't disorganized savages. This is calculated resistance. Every move is a trap. Every silence a warning. His final words, broadcast on an emergency channel, were intercepted across multiple sectors. We assumed weakness. We found intelligence. Cunning. Patience. They don't waste movement. They don't boast. They just kill, quietly, until you're gone. Across the fleet, panic spread. Crews began disabling AI systems, fearing infiltration. Security protocols shifted to manual. Empire-wide networks debated the footage, but by the time analysts agreed it was real, the second wave of Earth's defenders had already launched their next counterattack, without words, without mercy. The Empire regrouped. Humiliation wasn't something they tolerated. Within days, new directives were issued. Elite divisions deployed, fresh carriers dispatched, and high-ranking strategists brought in to crush the resistance. They came with advanced AI-driven tactics, war machines hardened against sabotage, cyber warfare battalions tailored for adaptive threats. Confidence returned to Imperial ranks. They believed the chaos of New Santiago had been an anomaly, one that superior firepower and system-wide recalibration would eliminate. They arrived at Lazarus Ridge, a crucial passage between two strategic colonies. Reconnaissance showed it as the most likely position for the next major push. The Empire fortified it thoroughly, drones overhead, auto turrets buried into rock faces, sensor webs layered in overlapping frequencies. Every soldier wore upgraded armor with thermal mapping and micro-shielding. Above them, airships scanned the skies. No chance for a repeat of the last fiasco, they told themselves. Then the air went still. 12 hours into their occupation, sensors began misfiring. Drones lost altitude, spiraling down one by one without external damage. Command systems lagged, delayed by milliseconds that rapidly escalated into full software breakdown. AI advisors shut off mid-calculation. Tech officers scrambled to restore functionality, only to realize their diagnostics were looping into dead ends. Each system was attacking itself from inside, caught in code recursion inserted from an unknown source. The first strike wasn't loud. It was deliberate. One of the outer sentry stations stopped responding. A patrol sent to investigate vanished. Minutes later, internal cameras flickered. Across the ridge, lights dimmed. Moments before backup generators activated, explosions erupted across every power conduit simultaneously. Their fallback energy grid ignited from within. The ridge plunged into darkness. Imperial soldiers, trained to operate even without AI assistance, regrouped manually. Commanders issued orders through shortwave relay. They dug in, believing humans would assault the ridge head-on now that systems were down. But the Terrans didn't charge. They stalked. Hours passed. Then one scream. Then silence. An hour later, 2 more men gone, no gunfire, no alerts. Pressure pads had been lifted, perimeter mines disarmed. Human operatives were crawling through the cracks in the rock, moving beneath heat detection, bypassing sound sensors, emerging behind the Empire's own lines without leaving a trace. By dawn, a third of the troops had vanished or been found dead in their own tents. Throats slit. One officer hung upside down from a steel beam with a warning etched into his armor. "We are not your prey." Panic exploded. Orders broke down. Units abandoned their positions. In trying to regroup, they entered paths already prepared for their flight, tight corridors laced with chemical incendiaries that detonated in sequence as they fled. Above, airships tried to provide cover. One by one, they lost propulsion. Human sabotage teams had breached the hangar bays 2 days prior, embedding delayed disruptors in engine housing. The sky filled with flaming wrecks. A surviving captain, wounded and hallucinating from smoke inhalation, attempted to surrender by projecting a ceasefire beacon. He was shot mid-sentence by a sniper from nearly 2 kilometers away, a round clean through his comms array, silencing the plea before it reached orbit. When reinforcements arrived 2 days later, all they found were burned husks of vehicles, shattered exocets, and scrap metal carved into twisted barricades. No bodies. No weapons. No evidence of what had happened, except the carved insignia on a metal wall, 3 slashes, interlocked. The Human Special Forces tag. Elsewhere, similar scenes repeated. Empire's cyber units deployed deep-scan AI clusters. Within hours, every server node crashed. Human engineers had encoded logic bombs and captured systems, designed to trigger only when copied. The more the Empire analyzed, the more systems collapsed. Imperial Command banned use of Earth-based tech fragments. They couldn't trust what was laced with traps. Even their medbots began failing, unable to distinguish between wounded humans and booby-trapped armor. Crowell, observing remotely, watched the data accumulate. He hadn't slept in days, not because of nightmares, but because of clarity. This was not disorganized retaliation. It was discipline honed by chaos. Terrans weren't adapting to war. They were evolving through it. In one intercepted feed, a human fire team leader barked instructions while stitching his own wound. His voice calm. Efficient. "We are the terrain. Make them fear the ground." Empire officials couldn't comprehend what drove them. These weren't battles for territory. These were dismantlings, piece by piece. Every protocol the Empire used was countered, turned, and used against them. Every assumption became a weakness. The conclusion was undeniable. The Empire didn't just underestimate Earth's soldiers. They misunderstood the species entirely. The Empire's facade began to crack. What started as isolated failures turned systemic. Reports flooded in, entire outposts going silent, patrol fleets vanishing without trace, colonies once loyal now gripped by riots. Logistics collapsed under pressure. Human forces had begun targeting supply lines across multiple sectors, not with fleets but with surgical strikes that rendered entire transport routes unusable. Fuel depots erupted mid-transfer. Communications blackouts followed every ambush. Within weeks, the Empire could no longer guarantee safe movement within its own borders. High-ranking officials dismissed the collapse as temporary. More ships were mobilized, more troops dispatched. But none returned from the Threx 9 outpost. It wasn't just overrun, it was reclaimed. Human forces didn't announce their landing, didn't issue threats or ultimatums. They arrived under stolen signatures, landed silently, and spread across the surface like precision instruments. Within an hour, orbital sensors recorded no active defense signatures. Surveillance satellites were found reprogrammed, broadcasting ancient Earth music on loop instead of telemetry. Empire citizens watched in disbelief as their media networks displayed images of the aftermath: clean, methodical dismantling of infrastructure. No cities razed, no civilians harmed, yet every military installation rendered inoperable. Ammunition stores emptied, vehicles missing cores, servers wiped. The assault didn't destroy, it neutralized. It wasn't revenge. It was message. Panic ignited. Civilian unrest spread to a dozen worlds. Planetary governors issued contradictory orders. On Varlin Prime, entire battalions laid down arms and refused to deploy. Propaganda efforts collapsed. The image of human brutality faded, replaced by something colder: precision without malice, dominance without chaos. The Empire responded with desperation. Commanders ordered saturation bombings on suspected human zones, even civilian ones. No contacts confirmed. Nothing retaliated. Weeks passed. Silence. Then, key command hubs began vanishing. Not destroyed, disassembled. Officers turned up missing. In one case, an entire war council disappeared mid-meeting. The only trace was a single file uploaded to the Imperial network, footage of each officer being individually tracked and tagged weeks before their abduction, voices whispering coordinates in a dead Earth language. Internal division followed. Some believed the humans had infiltrated the Empire at all levels. Others suspected rogue AI. Accusations spread. Arrests followed. Executions. No proof ever surfaced, but fear had taken root deeper than any fact. Desperate to regain control, the High Command initiated Operation Red Sun, a mass counteroffensive aimed at retaking former colonies and ending the psychological edge. It never launched. Half the fleets never arrived. Their navigational systems had been tampered with days before departure, rerouting them into dead zones or empty space. The ships that made it found themselves stranded, their fuel supply compromised by subtle chemical destabilizers introduced during recent maintenance cycles. Human engineers had reached their supply chains. The final blow came when Earth's forces launched their own incursion, not to claim land, not to plant flags, but to remove the Empire's presence entirely. Using hijacked vessels, they boarded outposts and redirected satellites to burn out targeting systems. Defense arrays turned on themselves. No warning. No declaration. Within hours, human teams vanished again, leaving behind ghost stations and empty data cores. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. Humanity, without territory or empire, was unraveling a force that had stood for centuries. And they did it without speeches, without banners. Just one system at a time, stripped bare. Kroval, now exiled from official command, sat alone, reviewing intercepted human logs. They weren't planning conquest. They spoke of thresholds, of ending the reach. For humans, war wasn't about expansion. It was about survival. When threatened, they didn't retaliate, they erased the threat. One log featured a human officer speaking to a new recruit. "We don't raise monuments. We leave warnings. They come, they bleed, they vanish. That's how you keep Earth safe." Imperial commanders began surrendering without engagement. Others fled. Some vanished. Entire sectors disconnected from the network, retreating into isolation. No one dared speak the name Earth openly anymore. It had become taboo, whispered only in dark corners by soldiers who had seen the red glow in the fog, who heard the silence before everything ended. The Empire, once defined by control, now struggled to explain its own disintegration. Not from a superior force, but from something far worse, a force that did not seek power, only assurance that no hand would reach for their world again. And no one could stop them. The last signal broadcasted from the Imperial Core sector was not a command, not a distress beacon, but a message, personal, unencrypted, and deliberate. It bore the voice of General Kroval, once a decorated war hero, now stripped of rank, his warnings long buried by the arrogance of the ruling elite. He appeared older, eyes hollow but steady, the lines in his face not from age, but from clarity bought with experience. "I record this not for absolution, nor for revenge. I speak because silence has been our downfall." His voice was calm, weight measured. The background held no banners, no insignias. Just darkness and the hum of an old generator. A stark contrast to the polished declarations the Empire once issued. Kroval's tone didn't ask for attention, it demanded reflection. "When I first faced them, I believed they were another anomaly. A violent accident in the chaos of war. But I learned. I washed. And I understood too late. Humans do not conquer like us. They do not broadcast dominance. They bury it." He described, without embellishment, the aftermath of battles where not a single human remained, but every piece of infrastructure was gutted with surgical precision. Whole facilities neutralized, yet untouched by fire or explosive. No celebration. Just stillness. Finality. As if the place had never existed at all. They don't fight for expansion. They fight for memory. Every loss they suffer is carved into strategy. Every wound becomes doctrine. He spoke of the child on Threx 9. A girl no older than 10, who found him collapsed among ruins. She offered food without fear, patched his injuries with steady hands, never asked his name. Her eyes held no hatred, only exhaustion. When asked why, she said, "You're not trying to hurt me now." Kroval paused. "That moment taught me more than the wars ever did. They don't crave destruction. But once provoked, once forced to defend, they will follow through beyond our comprehension. He recounted intercepted audio from Earth's field transmissions. Instructions whispered with no dramatics. Orders stripped of ego. Tactical, efficient, cold, yet human at their core. The voices of those who saw war as necessity, not heritage. One soldier, unaware he was being recorded, said, "No one's coming to save us. So we make sure they don't need to." Crowell leaned forward, his gaze heavier. "Understand this, they didn't win because they outgunned us. They didn't overwhelm us. They outlasted our assumptions." He referenced moments never publicized. Governors disappearing after failed ambushes. Human sleeper agents embedded in supply chains, waiting for months to execute one move. No ransom. No demands. Just removal. Precision actions with no interest in spectacle. They erased our fear, because they never showed us what to fear. And that's what undid us. Crowell admitted his own failures. He spoke of the council meetings, the dismissive laughter, the arrogance, the blind devotion to doctrine. He'd stood in those halls and watched fools argue policy while entire divisions were already gone. His voice didn't tremble. It hardened. We bred complacency. They nurtured readiness. He ended the recording with a warning, not a threat, not an ultimatum. Just truth stripped bare. Earth did not seek this war. But they ended it. Not with destruction. With discipline. With patience sharper than any blade. You will not see their fleets coming. You will not hear their boots landing. You will only know they were there when nothing functions and no one is left to answer your call. A pause followed. Then his final words. If they remember your name, it means you've made a mistake. And if they forget it, it means you never mattered. Pray they forget. The message spread in fragments across black markets, pirate networks, neutral space. No official channel acknowledged it. But its presence alone reshaped borders. Imperial factions fell back, not from pressure, but from the idea that they were already marked. Fear turned internal. Paranoia replaced ambition. Earth remained silent. No envies. No claims. Only that name, spoken in low voices across 1,000 systems. Not as a threat. As a fact. And the galaxy adjusted.